Hello and welcome to the 49 Minutes of Heaven we call the D1Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Patrick Rooney III. Today is our flag planting podcast. I am joined by three of America's great flag planters, the great Joseph J. Healy, the great Aaron J. Fitt, and Kendall Bradley Rogers. Gentlemen, we're jumping right in because we've got a packed agenda with a hard stop. Boy, is that like a band name, or would that be the name of a sandwich? Packed agenda with a hard stop. It feels like a band name.
I like that.
Yes, or at least a T-shirt.
Yeah, something.
Yes,
it's like a ska band, I think, like in the mold of the Mighty Mighty Boston.
I don't know what a ska band is.
Runes, congratulations to your Eagles.
Oh, thank you. Go Birds.
Yeah,
that's right.
Mason Rogers did wear a Saquon Barkley throwback Eagles jersey to school today. So my son hates the Chiefs, so you have an Eagles fan in him.
Runes, did you see the video yesterday? The woman who she was telling the news. She's a woman from actually I think she was from Delaware, but she was there for the game, and she said she had brought her own holy water to the game.
Holy water.
Their own holy water.
Speaking of the Eagles fans, did you guys see the video of the woman going around in the shopping cart that had like the barbecue trays of hot coals and had the pig for the Redskins, the Commanders, like in the actual basket. So she was cooking the pig in a shopping cart.
It's fantastic.
She said she went to Malvern Prep when she was younger.
Well, Malvern Prep, Kendall, is an all male high school. So
yes. Hey, you never know.
Yeah. So that's who knows. Boys, so we're going to do some flag planting today. Real quickly, don't overthink this. I would like an example of something outside of college baseball where you are a flag planter. I'll start us. Tater tots. Anyone that says fries are better than tater tots is just really ill. They're ill-equipped to. Yeah, like it's just like tots are better. Fries are easier. Tots are just better. Anyone have ever a personal flag plant that comes to mind?
I have a food-related one too. Go ahead, Aaron.
We're just going to follow up on Runes' comment. This was a topic of conversation in Omaha some years back in the press box. And I know somewhere in the nonsense tractor, there's an actual poll that we conducted of fries versus tots versus the other assorted, similar products. And I was disappointed in our group, the Ted Cahills of the world, the Kendall J. Rogerses of the world, etc. I don't think the tots won the poll. And it's an abomination. And I'm glad that you're here to correct the record.
Yes, thank you.
I mean, to be fair, I had the tachos in Omaha one year, and I think my stomach hurt for a week. So
tachos is the bridge too far.
Yes. Joe, what do you got?
First of all, I'm more of a fries guy, but then my flag plant is also food related. The most important part of a sandwich is the bread. That's long been my thing, is that like there are a lot of good sandwiches out there, but to me, what makes a transcendent sandwich, especially if I'm eating it like at a deli somewhere, is the quality of the bread. Because the ingredients tend to kind of be all in the same little area. There's only so much you can do as far as changing the taste of an Italian sub, for example. But if the bread is just really, really transcendently good, especially if it's fresh, that takes the sandwich to a whole nother level for me.
Interesting. The transcendent sandwiches. That sounds like a fantasy football team name, actually.
It's a good take.
Fitzy, what say you? What do you got?
Yeah, you know me. I've got flags planted all over this country. I got flags in every area code.
He's an imperialist when it comes to that.
French is an outrage. That's one of your great flags.
That's it's just a fact. It's just, I like French people. I like French culture. I love all that. French food is fine. But the language is just unacceptable. We've been there though. That's been covered. I got to say this is a weird one. I hesitate to even bring this one up. You guys know I'm an Android guy. I love my Android phone, my Google products, big Google guy. But I'm having to work on my wife's PC. I don't have my MacBook today, and it's just like I don't understand how anyone can do it. That's my plant. That's my flag right there. I just don't understand how anyone could not use a MacBook. It's just that the experience on Windows is heinous.
Fitzy, you're the Ricky Henderson of the modern workplace. You hit right-handed and throw left-handed.
Yeah, I have a backwards profile, no question.
Yeah, I love it, and you make it work. Kendall, where are you going with this?
I do not eat Mexican food outside of the state of Texas. That's my only flag plant.
I love that flag. That is amazing.
I'll you know what? I'm just going to go ahead, since we're all about annexing things these days, I'm just going to go ahead and count New Mexico as part of Texas because I do like the Santa Fe green chili and things like that. So we'll just lump New Mexico in with Texas.
I don't know if I agree with that take, Kendall, but I have great respect for it. I love that you're like, if there's a gas station in North Carolina that has great tamales, you're not in it
happening.
Because we got to go. We're getting our tamales at a Houston gas station.
Yeah, it's like going and buying a Lexus without tires or something.
Yep. Joe, you want to wrap us with a comment on Kendall's flag because that really impacts you as a former East Texan.
Joe will not deviate from me on this one.
Yeah, it's certainly buyer beware of Mexican food outside of Texas. I'm not saying I've never done it. I'm not saying I haven't had good meals at Mexican places outside of Texas, but spiritually I'm there with Kendall. But sometimes you realize you kind of have to. Sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and have Mexican somewhere else.
Would you say, like, in the Triangle area, like, is there a Mexican place that you would say would like remotely compare to a Houston area place?
Well, part of what's tough about that is like Tex-Mex has become a style of Mexican food that has chains now. So we have here in the Triangle like Chewy's, for example, which when I was growing up was just doable. A Texas thing.
Of course, it's a Texas chain.
Right. I'm working on trying to get Ninfas up here. For those who know, they know.
Oh, good luck.
That's my favorite. But so we have some Tex-Mex places. It doesn't hit the same for me, but they are trying.
Yeah.
Well
the world
done,
starts
boys.
in Texas, so.
Hey, let's get to our agenda. I can hear Chris from Louisville, our favorite listener, screaming into his phone right now that we're 7 minutes in and talking about food.
Chris would never ramble, so
yeah, he would chip in with his top 10 favorite flavors of celery. Celery out here.
Now you're about to make me Google, do they have different flavors of celery?
Yes, that's right. All right, so boys, we're going to talk about the 10 teams that didn't make the top 25 and maybe a few others, and then we'll get to the All-American teams. We're going to do some commentary on that. So I looked up last year we did 15 teams that didn't make the top 25, and there was 4 teams that were very interesting to me. Auburn was a team that we really fought ourselves on, and then ended up our gut instincts were right. Auburn did have an uncharacteristically tough season. Florida State, Kentucky, and Oregon were teams in our next 15. Obviously, that's 2 Omaha teams and a super regional team. So yeah, the next 15 is very interesting. Joe, why don't you start us? Because Kendall wrote this piece. It's a great piece. It came out on January 20th, and the first team is Alabama. Give us your perspective on Alabama in this grouping, Joe.
Yeah, I think a little bit, and this is not to disregard anything that the upside Alabama has, because I'll get to that in a second. But I do think having Alabama here and also having Auburn here again is kind of an acknowledgement of there's probably going to be an SEC team that things just kind of go right for, and they end up winning 16, 17 league games. And every year that happens, we're never quite sure who it's going to be, but that just kind of ends up happening. So I think a little bit of it is a bet on that. The second piece, though, is that I do think under Rob Vaughn, the floor has risen a little bit at Alabama. Last year, they had a team that was pretty heavily portal dependent. They had some pitching injuries, and yet they still worked their way through it, ended up in a regional just barely and didn't look great in the regional, but hey, they got there. And so they're in a similar situation this year and with a little bit better health on the mound. I mean, crosses my fingers in the direction of Riley Quick as I say that. If they stay healthy on the mound, I kind of like what they have there. And so just a little better luck there. I think they're in a pretty good spot, because I think we found out in this portal era that if you're bringing in accomplished portal hitters, that tends to translate pretty well. And so Alabama's done a pretty good job there. So it seems like a high floor team that kind of fits into this range.
Hey, Kendall and Fitzy, I'll give you guys you guys are on deck. Joe, I'm going to have you take Auburn too. Fitzy, be prepared for college at Chucktown, please. And Kendall, I'm going to have you do UConn if you don't mind.
Sure.
Yeah, with Auburn, it's, to me, my take on them is like, look, if it almost seems like it's the one thing that I don't anticipate happening is them finishing 26-35 in the pecking order. I feel like it could be a really good season if the freshman arms are ready to go, because I actually really like that freshman class of pitchers. When you combine it with the guys they have coming back on the mound, I just have a feeling that a team led by Butch Thompson is not going to have a tough year on the mound again, right? So there's that. And then they got some guys back offensively, right? I mean, not just Ike Irish, obviously, but, Cooper McMurray is quietly a really important piece. A guy like Derek Fabian can now just be a piece. Last year, there was a lot of buzz about him coming in, and, it didn't quite live up to that. But if he's just kind of a piece you have, a guy who's played that many SEC games, I like that. So, then you add on top of that portal guys like Bristol Carter that could be real game changers. So for me, though, what's going to dictate where they end up are those really, really talented freshman arms ready to go from the jump. If they are, it really raises their ceiling. If not, I do think there's a chance Auburn is kind of scrapping to get into the bubble conversation ultimately.
Yep. Kendall, you've done a lot on Auburn. Any follow-up point there?
Yeah, the really interesting thing is, kind of going back to the fall report and just kind of digging into the Tigers, is it looked like Eric Guevara had a really good fall for them. He was kind of their breakout player in the fall. So, I mean, I really like the lineup. I think it all just kind of hinges on, what does Christian Chatterton ever, do really well in the Sunday role? Does Cade Fisher, they spend a lot of NIL money on a guy like Cade Fisher. Like, does he meet that expectation level? If he does, then that gives them a frontline bona fide ace in the SEC. So I'm with Joe. I think Auburn's one of those teams with a lot of upside. I actually felt like Auburn and Alabama, when I was writing up the SEC preview, were almost like identical. Like I kind of felt like they had very similar question marks going into the season. So it'll be fascinating to see how that pans out. And frankly, I feel like all those teams in that range in the SEC are very similar. Like Oklahoma, we'll potentially talk about Ole Miss later. All those teams are in one group, and they all have very similar strengths. They all have very similar question marks.
Love it. Fitzy, I'm going to have you do go ahead, Fitzy.
Yeah, I know you want me to transition, but I'm just going to go ahead and plant a flag real quick because that's what we're about here. That's what we're about today.
Thank you.
Intrigued by both those teams, Auburn, Alabama, like them both.
Yeah,
I take Ole Miss over any of these teams in this bucket. Auburn, Alabama, or Oklahoma. Ole Miss is the team for me that's going to surprise.
Love that. That is excellent. And they're not on this list. Spoiler
not
alert.
on the top, not on this list. So I mean,
I love it. I love it. I mean, the thing about Ole Miss, we'll have time to talk about them, but it is 4 veteran pitchers that are back and a position player group that you can get excited about. There's a lot of things that have to happen, but I'm with you.
Not only is it veteran pitchers, like, I think people just forget how great Hunter Elliott is because he hadn't pitched really in 2 years because he had Tommy John at a weird time, and then like he just kind of took longer than expected to recover. But like he was like an All-American as a true freshman for a national championship team. I mean, this guy he's not just a veteran; he's a stud. He's a star. And there's just not a lot of those guys around. And then you throw in the other, again, Mason Nichols still there, like so many innings and stuff. And we've got plenty of veteran guys and exciting young guys. I love the combination. I think they're going to be so much better on the mound than people realize.
Yep. Hey, Fitzy, as you do college, the college, if you will, the College of Chucktown. Yeah. I just think this has been a revelation for me this offseason. I've thought they were a good program. They're a better program than I've been giving them mental credit for. This, under Chad Holbrook, they've won 37, 36, and 41 games in the last 3 years. That's a lot of wins. And last year, as I understand it, they won the CAA regular season and just lost in the conference tournament title game. Now, I get it. Like, they were dinged by the committee because, as I understand it, Charleston did not play one non-conference game against the ACC or the SEC. We don't need to relitigate all that. But the point is they're good. And, we forget Chad Holbrook's 7-year span at North Carolina and South Carolina, where he's going to Omaha 4 straight years as the lead recruiter for North Carolina. And then they're in the finals 3 straight years as the lead recruiter at South Carolina. Like, this dude has done some incredible stuff as a college baseball coach. And anyway, like it's almost like a public apology. This has been them being snubbed last year has helped me be more, I thought they were a good program. We examine their resumes every year as we diligently do. To be clear, I'm not on the committee, so just so I didn't personally snub Charleston. I'm not in that room. But their snubbing has helped me with understand their program better.
Yeah, and I think they're going to really use that snubbing as fuel because they should have gotten in, and I'm not going to really get it either. I made that point many times at the end of last year and beyond. They should have gotten in. and they know it, and they're still good. They were really good last year, and they're still really good. And especially, again, this is the thing that I'm going to keep on going back to. But for me, the teams that actually have proven pitching, reliable pitching, it just stands out to me so much. I know, like, there's the other opposite school of thought, kind of the Etheridge school of thought, if you will, that, like, well, you just have to hit home runs to compete and win nowadays. And, they do have some power on this team, but, like, I don't know. I think, like, the best way to combat the era of crazy home runs everywhere is to have a couple of really good, proven upperclassmen sinker ballers who are going to keep the ball on the ground, keep the ball in the park. And that's what Charleston's got with Jake Brink and Aiden Hunter. A really good, proven 1-2 punch. You got a really, again, experienced, accomplished closer with Davis Aiken at the back end, 11 saves last year. I mean, a nice piece. They got plenty of arms around him. So, like, for me, the pitching stands out. But also, I mean, again, there's experience in the lineup. I mean, Avery Neves and Darian Pendergrass in particular, just like Tyler Sorrentino. These are good quality seniors to kind of hang their hats on in the lineup. And, I think they look pretty strong up the middle as well. Although a freshman shortstop, for me, always a little bit of an eyebrow raiser, but I do like the sound of this Rafael Soto, young switch hitter. He sounds like a good player, Joe. I know you saw him in the fall, but I like this team a lot. I'm in on them. But I think I'm even more in on UConn. This was a team that I actually tried to fight for to get into the top 25. And Kendall, I know you had them, you wrote them up. Seemed like you like them as well.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with UConn, I was just looking up and down the roster. I mean, look at the number of upperclassmen. We talk about all the time about how important it is to have experience and have older guys on the team. I mean, we look at up and down UConn's roster and the projected lineup. I mean, they've got senior, 4-year junior, senior in their 3 rotation spots in their closer role. They've got one guy in their everyday lineup that is below a junior, including, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They have 6 seniors in their everyday lineup, and that plays, man. Like in college baseball, if you have that much experience, that many ABs, that many innings pitched, you're going to win a lot of games at a place like Connecticut. And I think when you look at their pitching staff as a whole, Gabe Van Eman has more of a reliever profile, but he's a guy that's going to move to the front end of the rotation. From the left side was up to 92, 93 at the Cape, showed well there, had good breaking stuff. Ian Cook is a name we've certainly heard, plenty over the last couple of seasons. And then, you look at Tommy Ellison, the number 3 role for them. He had a really good fall for them. It was up to 96 with a pretty sharp slider. So, Coach Mack is going to have a really good pitching staff. And I think the offensive lineup looks pretty good too. I mean, there's a couple of power guys who need to be a little bit more consistent overall. But, UConn's going to be, a top 25 caliber club. And don't be surprised if they're in a super regional again.
Yeah, I saw him in the fall and walked away thinking this is definitely a top 25 team. And I probably should have pounded the table harder for them in the meeting because I really like this team. I love the experience. I love the combination of power and speed and athleticism, the reliable defenders, and certainly those horses on the mound. I mean, they've been through super regionals in the past. I mean, the Ian Cooks and the Van Emans and these guys. Brady Aftham's still there at the back. I mean, really, really in on this team. I think that maybe this is the year they go to Omaha. Plant the flag. UConn to Omaha.
It's just such an old team. Like, how many teams do you see with that many seniors in key roles? It's kind of crazy, actually.
Seniors with super regional experience too, like winning, like key players on super regional teams. Like, these are not just old guys. They're guys.
I want these guys in my regional.
No. Yeah, they looked very comfy in the Norman Regional last year, like not spooked at all. So, Joe, you want to give us East Kakalaki?
I'd love to. Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, I think honestly having them in this range, even I know ECU fans were a little disappointed not to be given the benefit of the doubt in the top 25, but frankly, given 31 new players on the roster, not a lot of familiarity from one year to the next. I think honestly, just having them in this group is a nod to, hey, they've had precisely one subpar year under Cliff Godwin there. And so they're probably going to be really good again, especially in an American Athletic Conference that at this point, they're kind of just lapping in terms of quality. So it's a team that we're just kind of going to assume that they're going to be great again. And I think what's particularly different here that I'll be looking out for, and I think, Aaron, you mentioned this in the fall report on them, is just that they've had the luxury of going into pretty much every season, really since Gavin Williams became a thing, of having like a real dude on the mound. Zach Agnos, Gavin Williams, Carson Wisenhunt, Trey Savage. Like, that's a pretty long run of going into a season knowing you've got a guy on the mound. Kind of curious to see if there's a next man up in that regard, or if this ends up being a season where the pitching staff is a little more about depth than it is about being built around like a single dude.
Like it.
Yeah. The one thing I kind of thought of, guys, just kind of looking at, East Carolina's survey coming this season is like, you guys saw Sean Jenkins in the fall. Like, is he the kind of guy that can have a Friday night role and be a bona fide ace?
Basically, what they're asking him to do is what Jason DeCaro did for North Carolina last year.
Okay.
Another early enrollee, a 17-year-old kid. They want him to be your Friday guy. And you know what? He's got that kind of ability. I mean, it's now, obviously you also have to have pretty special makeup. DeCaro had it in addition to the stuff to be able to handle that as a true freshman. It sounds like he's got that, but we don't know. That's what we need to see. But certainly the stuff is there. I mean, he's a big physical horse, up to 96, multiple breaking balls that are swing and miss. I mean, field to pitch. He's a real stud. I mean, he's the next guy in their lineage of, the Wisenhunts and the Gavin Williamses and the Agnoses. Like, they've had these lately, they've been producing these Friday night dudes, and they got him, the Savage, of course. They got him now as a freshman ready to do that. And so we'll see if we can handle it. It's a major question mark. I mean, it's, I was certainly liked what I saw from all their newcomers on both sides, but boy, there's just a lot to prove there. There's just a lot to prove.
Hey, Fitzy, take us to Louisville, and spoiler alert, this is where one of my flags. And then, Kendall, I'm going to have you do OU right after.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, I wanted to plant a flag on Louisville, too, because I'm high on them. And I couldn't quite get myself to top 25 just because, that league is so deep. And there's just a lot of people you got to jump over to get there. But out of this next group of ACC teams that just missed our rankings, I think Louisville, not necessarily just missed, but the ones that are outside the rankings that are still in our projected regional field, Louisville, Georgia Tech, and Stanford. I do like Louisville the best of that bunch. I think Louisville is most capable of really surprising people and making a real run. I mean, I just think that it's again a team that's they went 16-14 in the ACC last year and they didn't get a bid, and that's because they played a really crappy non-conference schedule. But the schedule is a lot harder this year. It's actually the hardest schedule in the ACC. So if they can hold their own in the league, then they're going to be in a regional. They're not going to have the strength of schedule problem again. But I mean, it's some exciting younger players, sophomores and freshmen, emerging guys like the Lucas Moores, a speedy center fielder. And of course, we know Zion Rose, the very physical left fielder, and Alex Alisea is like your latest version of Christian Knapczyk, your little spark plug rugrat, 5'9", defensive whiz at shortstop, switch hitter like him. Those are all sophomores that I feel like are rising. And I kind of like, we spent all this time talking about how great it is to be old and how it's nice to have all these old players. It's also nice to have like young emerging stars, sophomores who've been there a year and like are now, it's kind of like a changing of the guard. You still have some older players there. Eddie King, again, nice to have him around still. I think it's a good lineup. It all comes down to the pitching and whether, it holds up. I mean, there's a lot of upside there with Tucker, Patrick Forbes rather at the front end. And, we know, Team USA guy, Parker Detmers has a lot of pedigree, but was not good as a freshman last year. And then Bivin, another Team USA guy at the back, Tucker Bivin. So, there is arm strength. I think they're going to figure it out on the mound. I think they're going to be the surprise team of the ACC. I just have that feeling.
I had two thoughts on Louisville, like Tag Davis. Let me just go full disclosure right now. Coached his dad at Malvern Prep. So like for Louisville to get a Malvern Prep connection, they get the Chicago toughness and now the Philadelphia Eagles toughness. Don't cross the streams. Like, look out, rest of the free world. And I'm kidding, but like I think Tag will do great. He's very talented. It's a lot, freshman year in college can be tricky, but I just like that. I don't want to say this to say that Dan McDonnell was in denial before, but like there's a lot of pride by Coach Mack in what that program has achieved, and there should be, right? They had been to one NCAA tournament before he got there. They've been to Omaha 5 times. They became a top 5 program since he got there. But the interviews I've seen this offseason are very much like, hey, we have fallen, And we don't like that. It's not more of this, well, we had 2 bad weeks, or we had these injuries, or we got snubbed, or the narrative right in this offseason right now feels very much like this, we need to own this. And so again, I love that. And Mac's a master motivator. So I love the vibe coming out of that program right now.
Well said, Runes. And I actually hadn't necessarily picked up on that, but if I love that as well. Let's not, you don't love the teams that get snubbed and then spend the next year whining about it as much as the teams that are like, all right, let's the way that you're saying Mac is channeling it feels so much more constructive to me.
Yep, 100%. Kendall, another one of the more intriguing teams, like OU, like trying to figure out what OU is going to be in the SEC has been. We've had a ton of conversations about it.
Yeah, no doubt, and we were talking about this in the group chat the other day, but a lot of the SEC this year is who you don't play more than anything else. And I think when you look at Oklahoma, the fact that they avoid A&M, Tennessee, Arkansas, and Florida, I think is big for them in year one. That's huge. And of the teams they actually play, they have Vanderbilt and LSU and Texas all at home. So I think the schedule is favorable for OU. I think the really interesting thing about this team is just how they stack up offensively. We talked earlier about teams maybe being a little unorthodox on the mound in that league. I think when you look at Oklahoma, they're going to be very unorthodox offensively. If you look at the modern college baseball power, it's the long ball, it's the gapper. For Oklahoma, it's going to be a lot of manufacturing runs. That's going to be the Reggie Willett style this year. They don't have the donkeys that LSU, A&M, and even a team like Ole Miss has this year. So. They're going to manufacture runs, with guys like Deshaun Harris. He had a really good fall for them. Jackson Willits, he does have some power, but again, an athletic guy. Jason Walk was really good in the fall for them from an offensive standpoint. And then Easton Carmichael is kind of their power surge guy. They're the veteran backstop. So it's going to be a really interesting offense. I think they're going to put a lot of pressure on opposing teams to make plays specifically, across the infield. And I think, pitching wise for me, I'm really high on OU's pitching staff. I think if you look at the Witherspoon brothers in the fall they had, particularly Malachi, because I think we all kind of know and think that Kyson's kind of a complete commodity. I think Malachi was a guy that, really improved his breaking stuff in the fall, really improved his command. They're sky high on him. And of course, Cam Johnson. I mean, this might be the guy I'm looking forward to seeing if he makes a big step forward in the SEC this year, because he arrived at LSU last year with all the fanfare in the world. We know how that aura and that mystique of LSU can kind of get to you as a first-year player at times. And he struggled. Let's just say it. He was not very good. And Skip Johnson kind of took him under his wing in the fall. He said the command and the breaking stuff was way better. He was more back up to 97, 98 in the fall. If you remember at the end of last year, I think his last outing last year for LSU, I want to say he sat 91, 93. So it gives you an idea how off he was just overall. And so I think Cam Johnson to me is a really interesting guy. And then you look at the back end of the bullpen, Kate Crossland and Dylan Tate were both guys who, were up to 97, 98 in the fall. They give them two really, really good options back there. And of course, Dylan Crooks, the brother of Jimmy Crooks, their backstop from a few years ago, had a really good fall as well. So the key with OU, really deep on the mound. The question mark for me in the rotation is just, does Cam Johnson flip that switch? And of course, offensively, do they have at least enough power or ability to manufacture runs in that lineup to keep up with the big donkeys of the SEC?
I loved your point about the scheduling, Kendall. That I had whiffed on that.
It's
but
huge.
Boy, that's huge. They also do not play the fabulous Rune Dogs this year. Hashtag
That
afraid
helped.
to compete. So yeah, that does help.
Yeah,
Hey,
they get Mississippi State. They get Mississippi State and Ole Miss both at home as well.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
They're very favorable.
Joe, you take Southern Miss. Fitzy, you take Stanford. I'll take West Virginia, and then we'll go from there. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, Southern Miss, to me, it comes down to this. If I'm actually pretty bullish on this group, this might be where the team that as I really dug into it a little bit more, had more remorse. Fitzy's making a flag planting sign, and it's maybe I'll talk myself into it as I talk through this, but I certainly like him more than I did when we were doing our top 25 discussion, largely for this point. If you look at the information that's coming out of Hattiesburg about this team, when you look at their fall report, when you look at the information they sent us, and the first thing that kind of comes to mind is like, look how experienced this lineup is. I like that, because when your questions at Southern Miss are, we're not exactly sure who are like workhorses on the mound are from a rotation standpoint, I'm going to bet on them figuring that out, because that's long happened at Southern Miss. Like they never really end up being like, well, they just weren't good enough on the mound. That's like never happened at Southern Miss. So if you're telling me they like what they have in their lineup, 7 starters back, plus they added Joey Urban, first team All Big East from Butler. They added Ben Higdon, who was in the dugout at Kentucky on a team that, eventually went to the College World Series, kind of soaking that all up. They had a freshman named Dre Barrett who's projected at third base, who was kind of their standout guy in the fall offensively. So that's 10 guys right there you feel pretty good about when you combine them with the 7 starters. And I like their bullpen a lot. Cross Sibley is back in the mix. They're moving Colby Allen to the rotation. He was great out of the bullpen last year. If you're looking for a guy who, it can be that next guy to give them what Nico Mazza gave them, or Billy Oldham has given them multiple years, he's certainly a guy on that list. So look, again, if you tell me that, hey, we really like what we got in the lineup, we've just got some questions on the mound, that signals to me that Southern Miss is going to be really good, because they're always going to figure out what they have on the mound. So I'm planting it. The flag is planted.
Yeah,
for me on Southern Miss.
Fitzy,
interestingly,
you sold him on it.
Yeah. See, that's on me. I get credit for that. That's another flag for me, really, indirectly.
Yes. It's flag adjacent.
Our friend, the Nerdmaster General, Mark Etheridge, saw these guys in the fall, and interestingly, he said, he really liked the arms, and is like, if they hit, then they're gonna be really good. But like, you're right. I mean, they actually have more, I guess, unproven things on the mound, but there's also plenty of experience there. But like, the talent on the mound is very exciting. I'm totally with you. They're gonna. I mean, once again, they're always a top 25 team, and they will be again.
Fitzy, keep the mic. Do Stanford.
Yeah, I will keep the mic and do Stanford. Stanford is a team that I put in my early 8 for Omaha, I believe, over the summer, just based on talent in that sophomore class primarily, and also the combination of some older senior players who are still around, the Timo Becerras and the Trevor Haskinses, up the middle. Charlie Somm, love team. Saborn, I mean, they got 4 seniors up the middle. Saborn Campbell in center field is another one. We just see him really kind of put it together this year, but he has ability. But the pitching talent for me is just really exciting. Now, this team was not good last year, Roots. I mean, what were they? 11 games under 500, something like that.
22 and 33, yeah.
That's not good.
Not
and now
good.
You're going to the ACC, and you're playing, against better competition, mostly on the opposite coast. And so, I think it's 4 or 5 cross-country trips they have to make, and it's an adjustment to the league. Like it feels like the ingredients are there for this to be a real struggle again. But I do really like the talent. So I was torn on this one. At one point I had fought for them to be in the top 25, just because, the Matt Scott, Christian Lim, if you're buying Joey Volchko, which I am. I saw him great on the Cape. It's potentially a 1-1, for next year's draft. It's just an enormous right-hander who can throw 100, and the secondary stuff and the facility is coming. Really like Trevor Moore at the back end. Again, Cape League All-Star, just a bulldog. Nick Dugan's still there. You've got Torrin O'Hara coming off, and Ty Uber, older players who are healthy again. And I just think that the pitching looks very intriguing to me, and you throw Rentaro in the mix at first base. If he's as good as everyone thinks he's going to be, like, that's a big difference maker. So, ultimately, I feel like if they were still in the Pac-12, if there were still a Pac-12 and they were still in it with this exact roster coming in, I'd be like, oh yeah, this is like a top 15, well, maybe top 20, top 25 team based on what they did last year. You still have to say maybe back into the top 25. I think they have that kind of club. I'm just a little nervous about the transition to the ACC with a team that had no success last year. So that combination for me is why they're not in the top 25, and why I could see it going sideways and not even being a regional team. But I think that there's just too much talent here, and Dave Esker's too good of a coach, and they still have been to Omaha, 3 times in the last 4 years, right? Was it that stretch just ended last year, or am I wrong on that?
Yeah, and it was coming. I think your point's well taken, Fitzy. Like they were terrible in 2020. Like the pandemic year, Stanford was heinous, and then 3 straight Omahas. Now, does this position player group have a bunch of first-round picks on it that were just young and not ready yet? I don't think so. But here's a question for the group. Kendall, I'll start with you. I'm setting the over-under for home runs for Rintaro Sasaki, who, by the way, that podcast dropped today. Darren Vaught's podcast. We got to preview the first 3 episodes. If you're like me and you're really having a tough time trying to understand the phenomenon that is Rintaro Sasaki and like who is he, how good is he, Darren Vaught's podcast is exactly what you want. It's a great listen. It's very informative. He does a bunch of great interviews. So, Kendall, starting with you, over-under on Rintaro Sasaki home runs is 19.5. What would you like? Remember, he's 6 foot, 275 pounds, and a left-handed hitter. Over under 19.5 home runs.
I'm going to go under.
Joe.
I'm going to go over. I think you have to remember what Sundays look like in the ACC sometimes.
Fair.
Yeah.
Fitzy?
Yeah, over. I mean, it's going from the Pac-12 to the ACC. Almost every part of the ACC is very, how do we say, hitter friendly. Let's put it that way. A bunch of bandboxes in this league, and he's going to make them look small. It's going to be, I keep thinking it's going to be the best kind of freshman slugger thing that we've probably seen since Seth Beer, like when he was a sensation. I think Rintaro could do even more damage as a freshman than Beer did as a freshman.
Man, I don't know what to pick. Like my brain says under, my heart says way over. Like I just have no context for this guy. Like I'm so excited to watch him. I'll take the under. But I think I prepare myself to be wrong. You know, like it's just this dude's one of the all-time great. He's one of the best high school players in the history of a country. Like a country that kills us in the WBC too, by the way. You know, like they're a country that takes baseball really, really seriously. Anyway.
And yet you're going to be a hater because you're just a Philly curmudgeon. Classic.
Just to be clear though, Fitzy, it's not one of my flags. That flag is, I'm holding the flag, but it is not planted. Boys, I'll take West Virginia and I'll use it as an excuse to talk about the Big 12. Boy, I did the Big 12 preview. And if I do say so my dang self, I think it's a banger. Like it's one of my all-time favorite previews that I've ever written. Speaking of West Virginia, I'll give you my favorite ditty that I wrote. This is when you know you're getting tired as a writer. So one of the keys to West Virginia is on the mound, and they have a 6'8" junior, Robbie Porco, that is he's really critical. He's 6'8", 235. When you see him healthy, he's not been healthy a lot. When you see him healthy, he'll touch upper 90s and the sliders upper 80s. And so I wrote, but when healthy, this is end quote, but when healthy, this at bat is uncomfortable like forgetting to pay your taxes, which is can't say that I can.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's unfortunate and uncomfortable. I'm told. Of course, being married to the great J-Row, Jennifer Rooney, that would never happen in this household. But you know, West Virginia. So, you know, we felt convicted on Arizona. We felt convicted on Oklahoma State. TCU was a little bit of a flyer for us. I mean, to go from missing the NCAA tournament to ranked, but, you know, they do have the bones of an Omaha team back. Those kids are juniors. But when you get to West Virginia, they do lose J.J. Weatherholt, obviously. It was a really complete offense last year. Really, really good. Like that wasn't just the Derek Clark, J.J. Weatherholt show. And a lot, you know, Brody Kresser's going to move to shortstop. He was excellent. Remember, Weatherholt was hurt a lot last year, and they kept on keeping on. And this is a team that also almost won the Big 12 2 years ago. You know, now again, Randy Mazey's also gone. We think Steve Sabins is going to be a phenomenal head coach. There's just a lot of program momentum here. Their catcher, Logan Save, is a baller. How about a catcher that hits second? Like he's an athlete. He's a little undersized, but he's a good player. One of their other keys besides Porco, Chase Meyer, is going to be their Friday night guy. This is nasty, gnarly stuff, but he hasn't thrown strikes. You know, this is a loose arm, upper 90s with a banger of a breaking ball. Like this is just a wipeout breaking ball. If he's in the zone, he could easily go 12 punch outs, but he could also walk the entire stadium. So what is his growth? It sounds like he was good in the Cape, but again, West Virginia is a fascinating team because there's a wide range of outcomes there.
You and I were arguing about this a little bit, Runes, because I'm all in. My chips are all in. I've got multiple flags planted on the Chase Meyer hill. This guy is ridiculously good. I think the pitchability is coming. I know you're still nervous with the strike throwing. You couldn't get there because you're a hater, Philly curmudgeon. We get it. You couldn't get there with the strike throwing. I can. I saw it with my own eyes at Wake Forest. Best stuff is the best stuff I saw all fall. It was the best, by far the best break ball I saw. It was ridiculous slide piece. He's a dude. He's gonna be an All-American this year. West Virginia gonna be a top 25 team. I've got like 50 teams in my top 25 guys. I like everybody. I'm not a hater.
Hey, Joe, I know you keep good notes. You keep copious notes. Just be clear, Fitzy has called me a Philly curmudgeon twice in this podcast. So I believe that's another flag that he has planted. He's planting that Philly curmudgeon flag on me. Hey, I'm
starting to think he just doesn't like Philly.
Yeah, well, go Birds. There's a lot of go Birds envy out there, Kendall. Let me wrap up the Big 12. So the middle of the Big 12 is really we've settled on 7 NCAA tournament bids for the Big 12, and with all these new configurations of leagues, it's tough to figure out how this is going to shake out. I think we went West Virginia, Texas Tech, Kansas, Arizona State, UCF, Cincinnati just missed. I'll tell you, the bottom of the Big 12 could be a problem for the Big 12. Baylor has like nothing but seniors in their lineup and an all left-handed rotation. They're not going to be a laydown this year. Houston, I think, is going to be more talented. BYU, very old team, almost the entire unit back from last year with a sexy transfer in like Ryder Robinson, who was a national recruit, who they can plug and play at shortstop in the middle of the order. The Big 12 is going to be fascinating. I don't know how to place those teams like 4 through 10. I will say this about Kansas, because that is a team where we differ a little bit from others. Brady Council, the transfer, is going to come in and play. This kid played every day for 3 years at Minnesota. He is, by age, he is their youngest position player starter. He's 21 years old and has played 3 years of college baseball. He is Kansas's youngest position player starter, and they've got an ace in Dominic Vegley on the mound. That's the preseason Big 12 pitcher of the year. So I know Kansas has been on the rise. They haven't quite popped the tournament yet. I feel that's one of my flags is we picked them 5th in the league, and I know that feels aggressive because they haven't really done that, but I do feel great conviction there. So there you go.
Big 12. And I've got a little sneaky conviction in UCF too. That's one that I think is just lying in the weeds. I wish we could have made room for them in our field of 64. They were right there. I think they're. Do we have them in? I don't remember. No, we had that discussion.
Well, maybe not. Maybe I'm.
I like their team.
Just missed. Yep, I'm with you.
Again, you got some experience. You got guys on the mound. I think they're going to be frisky again.
Yes, 100%. Boy, should we do a little tease of the All-Americans and then we'll wrap it? So and by the way, if you're watching this, you can see it. If you're listening, you cannot. I want to encourage everyone. Now is the time to get your subscriptions to our site. Kendall's got a quality coupon up there. It's Preview 25. Preview 25 gets you 25% off. One thing I want to be clear: if you have SEC Extra, by definition, you have ACC Extra. You don't have to do 2 separate subscriptions. If you have ACC Extra, by definition, you have SEC Extra. Those 2 packages are a pairing. They come together. And so don't feel like you have to buy both of those. But again, Bradley Smart is doing great work at ACC Extra. You know that Joe and Mark Etheridge are doing awesome stuff at SEC Extra. So 2 questions on the All-American team, boys. Let's do the fun one first and the tough one second. Who was one of your favorite players that got included that maybe you didn't see coming? So like a fun player that kind of surprised you or came out of nowhere, or not came out of nowhere is the wrong one, but I'll start us. DJ Newman is our first team All-American from Bowling Green. And what I love about that is it gave me a chance to remember how magical Bowling Green's season was last year. Now, they didn't win the tournament, the MAC tournament, so that Western Michigan did. And, hey, Western Michigan gave Kentucky a heck of a game in the Lexington Regional. But DJ Newman is a 6-foot, 180-pound right. Just like if he walked into your business office, you wouldn't even notice him today, right? Like just he's the everyday American. And but he's just a great baseball player. He's their best hitter. He's their best arm. Like didn't do a lot of showcases or travel ball, kind of like he's a throwback's throwback. And he's one of the very best players in the MAC. He has a chance to help them win a game every single day. So for DJ Newman to be a first-team preseason All-American, that was awesome. Kendall, do you have a player that was really fun for you?
That was really fun?
To see him included on the All-American teams?
Yeah, I'll go with Grayson Grenzel from Oregon. I really liked the way that he pitched when I saw him in the Super Regional in a pretty hostile environment. I mean, it was like 105 degrees. He pitched his ass off. And so I'm just a big fan of him. He's got a pretty solid fastball, anywhere from 90, 93, really, really good breaking stuff. I think he's going to have a big year in the Big Ten. So I'm a big Grayson Grenzel fan. Really high on Oregon, by the way, speaking of flag planting. But is there flag planting on the number 12 team in the country, though? I don't think so.
Underrated.
Yeah.
Most underrated coach in college baseball, right, Aaron?
Yes, right.
I like it. Joe, who is a player that you personally enjoy?
Yeah, I think it's great. We got Kenton Deverman on the third team from Evansville. And with the acknowledgement, let's be honest, with the acknowledgement that if Evansville hadn't gone on the run they went on, we're probably not including him. Maybe we talk about him in the process, but he's probably not on. But what he did last year, especially in the regional, when, I had coaches unaffiliated, anybody who was in that regional, bring him up in conversations over the summer and is like, man, that was one of the gutsiest performances that, I can imagine going into that place and pitching as well as he did. And then, getting Evansville to its greatest result in the history of the program. And furthermore, it's cool that, look, if I have to assume, Kenton Deverman is only a sophomore coming off a freshman year that was outstanding. I have to assume that if he had signaled like, hey, I'd like to play my baseball elsewhere this season, like he would have had plenty of options. And he's back at Evansville on what is, quite frankly, probably going to be a rebuilding Evansville team that's probably more like a third or fourth team in the Missouri Valley and not the favorite to win it. So I think it's cool that he's back in Evansville trying to help build that thing back up. So just a cool story all around with him.
Love it. Fitzy?
My player that I was delighted to have on here is Brian Curley, who played that same regional as Deverman last year when he was at VCU, and he was just a stud. Come out of the bullpen for a long outing, and it was just he was a back end guy last year, but it was like it was like a stopper hybrid role where he would come out early and then just kind of take it the distance, almost like the second half of a opener situation. But he was, he's like 5'10" and he's a tank and his stuff is absurd. I don't know that he's going to be Georgia's closer. I don't know what role they're going to use him in. They've got a lot of options in that bullpen. I just went ahead and listed him as a closer when I did the projected lineups because I think he's the best guy out of all of them. We have him on the second team. I mean, it's a ridiculous slider. It's, again, 5'10" and he throws 95, 98 or something. I mean, he's so much fun. I'm excited to see what he can do in the SEC. And just one quick observation on the team in general, the All-American team in general, before I give it back to you, Runes, for your favorite guy. It was striking to me to see 10 ACC players on the first team and only 3 SEC players. And it made me do a double take. And I went back and re-looked at all the teams. Like, what are we missing something here? I don't think we are. I just think the ACC has a lot of star power this year, and maybe that's a product of, the SEC had a great year last year, had a ton of players drafted, and maybe there's just not as much established high-end star power this year because of the draft. I don't know what the answer is, but it kind of feels like maybe the ACC is primed for like an all-time banner year. And could this be a year where they actually, it feels sacrilegious to even suggest this, but could they actually be the better league, the best league ahead of the SEC? It's been a long time since that's been the case. Maybe it is just based on, it's one index, but 10 first-team All-Americans compared with 3 for the SEC is a lot. I don't know who you'd really argue against. I mean, out of those 10, we went back and forth at shortstop, Merrick Houston versus Justin LeBron, Wake Forest versus Alabama. I went with the older player, but that was divisive on our staff. It was like a split down the middle. So there's here and there you can nitpick a guy, but Burris and Canarella and Jamie Arnold. I mean, these are no-brainer guys. Aiden Canuck. I mean, these are no-brainer All-Americans on the first team. So I just think the ACC, Daniel Cavey as well. I mean, there's a lot of star power in that league this year.
Hey, Kendall, I'm gonna bring a final question to you, but that's Fitzy, that is my theory. The SEC had 98 players drafted in a 20-round draft. Like, that is a massive number. It was it was double every other conference, I think, minus the ACC. And so yeah, it was incredible. Hey, Fitzy alluded to it, Kendall, but and I know you have a hard stop, so if you have to pop off, go for it.
No worries.
So hardest position, I feel like you called me to task on this rightfully, was outfield was really hard. And as our West Coast correspondents, I probably didn't like. Here are the first 6 names that just missed at outfield: Harrison Didewick of Virginia, Brandon Compton of Arizona State, Brendan Summerhill. Look up his numbers, listeners. Brendan Summerhill of Arizona had a monster year last year. Henry Ford of Virginia, Hunter Ensley at Tennessee, John Bay at Austin P at almost a 1,300 OPS. But yeah, Kendall, if you want to comment on that, but I thought outfield, we just ran out of spots.
Yeah, the 2 guys I really hated to leave off in hindsight were Brendan Summerhill at Arizona, just given his production in the past, his prospect status, and also Hunter Ensley at Tennessee. I just go, I know the numbers from last year aren't quite as what some of these other guys' numbers are, but I mean, I keep just thinking about just how awesome his defense was in Omaha last year. And that is as premier defender as you can get. And I think he's going to have a big year offensively. And, Hunter Ensley was the other guy for me. And, we talked about the ACC versus the SEC. How about Tennessee not having a single player in any of these 3 teams? That doesn't mean Tennessee's not going to be a really good team. It just means they just don't have that one guy who's an All-American going into the season.
Yeah, it means they have a lot to replace, right? Like the team that won the national title. There's a lot of
there's a lot of potential guys, like Dean Curley is a prime example. We talked about Ensley, etc.
Yep. Joe, what any position that jumps out that you felt like it was hard to pin it down?
Yeah, I think catcher. I think that's evidenced by the fact that our second team DH and our third team DH are guys who are listed at catcher. So we have 5 catchers on our 3 All-American teams. And honestly, I think that's great from the standpoint of it's not usually the position you look at and go, well, that's loaded. I think we think of outfield as one, maybe, some of your shortstop can be that way. But it was catcher this year. And there are even guys that got left on the cutting room floor that I think in other years might have been in serious consideration to get on one of these teams. So I thought it was beautiful that catcher of all things was where we had a lot of trouble.
Yep. Fitzy, do you have one that's top of mind, or can I wrap it there?
Yeah, that's the same for me, catcher and outfield. And boy, I mean, just real quick, I mean, gosh, you mentioned I think we had 4 UVA players on these teams. And you just mentioned 2 more, Didewick and Ford, who were like just off on the outfield list. Like Virginia, talk about star power. My God, they got a lot of guys.
Yeah, again, I think I just said this, but like Virginia, like you go through this All-American list, you're like A&M 1, check. Virginia 2, check. It's just like their roster is all over these places. Boys, as we wrap, it's just the turns of phrases today were elite. Transcendent sandwiches. Joe said, and I quote, "I'm with Kendall spiritually." The floor has risen was another great saucism from today. Fitzy, hashtag flag planter. Philly curmudgeon. Fitzy, I used the word that you love. You turned it into the verb delighted. I mean, that was just elite right there. So yeah, just
I'm just very flattered. I've never had somebody tell me they're with me spiritually. So thank you, Joe.
Yes.
The correct answer would be to tell me, and also with you.
And also, that's right. May the force be with you. Gentlemen, it was good to see you. Hey, everyone, get on the website right now. There's so much good stuff on there right now. We are officially preseasoning, to quote the great Darren Vaught. And that is it. Everyone have a great week, and we'll catch you next time on the D1 Baseball Podcast.